Get ready for the week's top TSX stock picks, as NorthFlow Finance AI breaks down the top 5 stocks from June 8th. You won't want to miss this. This week we're taking a look at ATRL.TO, a stock that caught our attention with a MACD bullish crossover plus a volume surge signal detected on June 9th. This signal was particularly interesting, as it indicated a potential shift in the stock's momentum. The MACD bullish crossover signal, combined with a volume surge of 30.9%, suggested that the stock was gaining traction and could be due for a rally. At the time, the Relative Strength Index or RSI was at 54.0, indicating that the stock was not overbought and had room to run. The entry price for this stock was $82.17, which we'll use as a benchmark to evaluate its performance. This week, ATRL.TO gained 2.3%, opening at $80.35, reaching a high of $84.02 and a low of $79.16, before closing at $82.21. This performance is relatively modest, but it does validate the original signal, as the stock is still trending upwards. The fact that it was able to hold its gains and close near the high end of its range is also a positive sign. In the news, there's been a lot of reaction to the leadership change at ATRL, as well as the company's new mandate with EDF Nuclear. It seems that investors are viewing these developments as positives, which could be contributing to the stock's upward momentum. The market is clearly responding to this news, and we're seeing the stock's price reflect that. Looking ahead to next week, we'll be watching to see if ATRL.TO can continue to build on its momentum, and whether it can break through the $84 level. We'll also be keeping an eye on the company's upcoming announcements, to see if they can provide any further catalysts for growth. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a closer look at GIL.TO, a stock that caught our attention when a signal was detected on May 26, 2026. This signal was triggered by a combination of a moving average golden cross and a significant volume surge, which we always keep an eye out for. The moving average golden cross, combined with a volume surge of 99.0%, is a bullish indicator that suggests a potential trend reversal or continuation, and at the time, the Relative Strength Index or RSI was at 54.3, indicating that the stock was not overbought. This signal meant that the stock was gaining momentum, and the volume surge confirmed that there was significant interest from investors. The entry price at the time was $82.7, which seemed like a good opportunity to get in on the action. This stock had a great week, gaining 6.3%. It opened at $80.06, reached a high of $85.39, and a low of $79.47, closing at $85.13. This performance definitely validates the original signal, as the stock has continued to trend upwards. The weekly high and low show that the stock had some volatility, but overall, it's been a positive week for GIL.TO. The stock's ability to close near its weekly high is also a good sign. There's been some recent news about Nike's running revival, and how it's changing the narrative around Nike stock, which could have a ripple effect on other stocks in the industry, including GIL.TO. This news could be contributing to the stock's weekly performance, as investors become more optimistic about the athletic wear industry as a whole. The running revival could lead to increased demand for athletic wear, which would be a positive for GIL.TO. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether GIL.TO can continue its upward trend, and if the stock can break through any resistance levels. We'll also be keeping an eye on any further news or developments that could impact the stock's performance. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock number 3 of 5, RML.V, where we detected a signal on June 11th. This signal was a MACD bullish crossover combined with a volume surge, which is a pretty powerful indicator of potential upward movement. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal is a strong indication that a stock is about to make a move, and in this case, it was accompanied by an 82.5% increase in volume, which is a big deal. At the time, the RSI was at 53.8, which is relatively neutral, but the volume surge and MACD crossover suggested that there was some real momentum building behind this stock. This signal was particularly interesting because it suggested that RML.V was getting ready to break out of its recent range. This week, however, RML.V actually declined by 2.5%, which might seem like a contradiction to our original signal. It opened at 119, reached a high of 119, and a low of 110, before closing at 116, which is actually our entry price. Despite this decline, the stock is still holding up relatively well, and we're not seeing any major sell-off, which suggests that our original signal may still be valid. There's been some interesting news about Resoro Mining Ltd. recently, with private companies owning 36% of the company, but retail investors actually holding the largest stake at 38%. This could be a factor in the stock's recent performance, as individual investors may be holding onto their shares, which could be supporting the price. This dynamic could also lead to some increased volatility, as retail investors can sometimes be more emotional in their buying and selling decisions. As we look ahead to next week, we'll be watching to see if RML.V can regain some of its momentum and start moving higher again. We'll also be keeping an eye on the volume to see if we get any follow-through on that initial surge, which could confirm our bullish thesis. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock number 4 of 5, DBG.V, where we detected a MACD bullish crossover combined with a volume surge on June 2nd. This signal was particularly interesting, as it indicated a potential buying opportunity in the stock. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal is a strong indicator of upward momentum, and at the time, it suggested that the stock was poised for a move higher, with the Relative Strength Index, or RSI, at 57.3, which is not overly extended. The volume surge of 171.7% was also a significant factor, as it showed that there was real buying interest behind the move. This combination of technical factors made for a compelling case to consider entering the stock at the time, with an entry price of $3.07. This stock had a relatively modest gain of 2.1% this week. It opened at $2.89, reached a high of $3.02 and a low of $2.55, closing at $2.95. While the stock didn't exactly shoot the lights out, it did hold up reasonably well, which could be seen as validating the original signal to some extent. The fact that it was able to find support and bounce back from its lows is also a positive sign. In recent news, there's been a lot of attention on TSX penny stocks with market caps under $600 million, and DBG.V is certainly one of the names that's been on people's radar. This could be contributing to the stock's resilience, as investors look for hidden gems in the smaller cap space. The fact that it's being mentioned alongside other potential watch list candidates could help to keep the stock top of mind for traders. As we head into next week, viewers should be watching to see if the stock can build on its recent momentum and make a push back towards its recent highs. We'll also be keeping an eye on the broader market trends to see if they'll have any impact on the stock's performance. Now let's move on to our next stock. We're taking a look at stock LUNR.V, where our system detected a signal on June 12. This signal was triggered by a MACD bullish crossover combined with a significant volume surge, which caught our attention as a potential buying opportunity. The MACD bullish crossover plus volume surge signal indicated a shift in momentum, suggesting that the stock was gaining upward traction, and the volume surge of 183.5% confirmed that investors were taking notice. At the time, the RSI was at 58.6, which wasn't overly extended, allowing for further potential upside. This combination of factors led us to consider LUNR.V as a potential long position. This stock had a strong week, gaining 12.7%, and it's interesting to note that it opened at $20.58, reached a high of $23.59, and a low of $19, before closing at $23.19. This performance largely validates the original signal, as the stock has continued to trend upward. The move upward was quite impressive, especially considering the overall market conditions. In recent news, London Gold made a significant distribution of LUNR Royalties shares through a dividend, which is a positive development for shareholders. This move likely contributed to the stock's upward momentum this week, as investors reacted positively to the news. As we look ahead to next week, viewers should watch for whether LUNR.V can maintain its upward trajectory, and also keep an eye on any potential resistance levels that the stock may encounter. It will be interesting to see if the stock can continue to build on this momentum, or if it will consolidate its recent gains. That wraps up our weekly review. Subscribe for daily TSX signals from NorthFlow Finance. Thanks for tuning in, subscribe for more, and remember, this is not financial advice, consult a professional before making decisions.